It was one of those cloudy days that seemed to reflect my uneasy heart. I received a call from the police on my smartphone. "Hello, this is Mary Arthur." "What?" The call was about my husband, Ken, being involved in a traffic accident and rushed to the hospital in an unconscious state. Since I was at my part-time job, I got permission to leave early and headed to the hospital right away. On the way, I was beside myself with worry. Being rushed to the hospital was no small matter. My hands were shaking uncontrollably, and I could feel my heart pounding louder and louder. Upon arrival, a rather young-looking doctor explained the situation to me. Ken's life was not in danger, but he had suffered a severe head injury, and there might be lasting effects. A few minutes later, my daughter-in-law, Lynn, and my grandson, Joseph, arrived. Lynn was carrying a duffel bag in one hand and holding Joseph's hand with the other. However, upon entering the room, Joseph unusually started to fuss. "Mom, I'm thirsty." "Oh, but I didn't bring any drinks with us." "Then, let's buy something." As Lynn went to the store to buy a drink, Joseph slowly took an envelope out of his pocket. "I've got a letter from Grandpa. He said to read it in secret from everyone else." "For me?" With a sense of curiosity, I pulled out the contents to find a folded note inside. I read the words written in Ken's handwriting, but I can't understand their meaning. However, it was clear that he was trying to communicate something. Desperate for any clue, I instinctively reached for Ken's wallet before Lynn could return. I needed to check its contents quickly, my hands almost slipping in my haste. I carefully yet swiftly opened his long wallet. "My name is Mary Arthur. I'm a working housewife, working part-time about 5 days a week. Having been at the same job for about 7 years, I guess you could call me a bit of a veteran." The decision to start working part-time came after discussing what to do after Ken's retirement. Ken was a teacher and could choose to retire or continue working as a part-time lecturer upon reaching 65. Even as a part-time lecturer, the income would be less. Considering our retirement. Yes, it would be better to increase our savings a bit, wouldn't it? After that conversation, I started working at a nearby supermarket. By then, our son, Harry, had already started his job, leaving just the two of us at home. Harry had moved into an apartment close to his workplace right after graduating from college. I occasionally worried about how he was doing but remembered he was already a capable adult. There was no need to worry unnecessarily. Then one day, I received a call from Harry. "Hey, Mom. There's someone I'd like to introduce you to." Both Ken and I were surprised by this call. The woman Harry brought home was very cheerful and energetic, which made a great impression. "Nice to meet you, my name's Lynn," she said with a smile that could rival a celebrity's, blushing as she made eye contact with Harry. They were introduced by a junior at Harry's company, and it seems they hit it off right from the day they met. "I just knew she was the one the moment we met." "Come on, how many times are you gonna say that?" Watching the two of them bask in their blissful aura made everyone around them feel happy too. It seemed like, together, they could overcome anything that came their way. Ken and I blessed their future. When it came time to discuss where they would live after their wedding, Harry mentioned something surprising. "Actually, we'd like to live at my parents' house. Don't you want to rent a place just for the two of you?" "Yeah, but Lynn mentioned she'd feel more at ease having supportive people around, especially when considering pregnancy." Lynn had lost her own parents in an accident and didn't have anyone else to rely on. Indeed, pregnancy and childbirth come with their own set of worries. Even someone as cheerful as Lynn might have her own concerns internally. "All right, we'll make sure the spare room is ready for you to use." "Thanks, Mom." This meant I was about to take on the role of a mother-in-law in a more official capacity. I was worried about whether I'd do well, but Ken didn't seem particularly concerned. "Well, once the baby's here, Harry will probably find a new place for them to move out to," he said nonchalantly, sipping his coffee and returning to his novel. "I hope so," I replied, shrugging. A few months after they started living with us, we found out Lynn was pregnant, and everyone was delighted. Despite Lynn's morning sickness and the various anxieties that come with pregnancy, I stayed by her side. The following year, Lynn gave birth to a healthy boy. As a grandmother, the arrival of my grandson was a joyful and profound moment. They named him Joseph. He was named after the warm sunshine that filled his birthday. "That's a good name," Ken commented, smiling at his grandson every day. Almost too busy to even glance at his novels. For a while, I was busier than ever. Lynn, still new to parenting, frequently sought my help. Diaper changes, feedings, nighttime crying, and when Joseph had a fever were all times she called on me. "Lynn, you're a mom now. You can't always rely on me, you need to learn to do these things on your own. But I'm just worried I'm not doing it right." "It's okay, you're doing great. Don't worry." Despite my encouragement, Lynn struggled to gain confidence in her parenting skills. In the end, I ended up supporting Lynn with childcare much longer than expected. Because of this, I had to ask for fewer shifts at work, eventually going down to 3 days a week. A year after Joseph was born, it seemed like Lynn finally felt confident enough to handle things on her own. "Mom, I'm good. I can do it by myself now," she started to say that with a smile more often. That smile truly put my mind at ease. Then, as the seasons passed and we experienced the cherry blossoms fall 4 times over, Ken and I reached our 60th birthdays, a memory fresh with celebration photos. Ken retired and started working part-time as a lecturer at the same school. Harry seemed busy, mumbling to himself as he worked on his laptop daily. A peek over his shoulder revealed complex pie charts and spreadsheets full of numbers. "Don't work yourself too hard, it's bad for your health. Why don't you spend some time with Joseph?" "Yeah, I will, once I finish this." He said this somewhat absently, then dove back into his screen. Watching him, I couldn't help but sigh internally. Meanwhile, I found the right moment to go back to working 5 days a week, just like before. Getting back into my usual work routine, I felt like I could relax a little more. Harry and Lynn didn't bring up moving out. Lynn didn't return to work, focusing on housework and childcare instead. Since Harry was earning enough, they didn't seem worried about finances. However, I was surprised when Lynn asked if she could contribute a little to the living expenses. "Please, Mom. I'll keep taking care of the house and Joseph just like before. Isn't Harry's income enough? We want to save for the kids' future expenses, like extracurriculars and education." But before I could finish, Ken chimed in. "That sounds reasonable. Education costs a lot these days." Coming from him, someone who's been in the field, his words carried weight. "It's a wise decision. And Dad agrees," Lynn added, seemingly getting Ken's approval. Reluctantly, I agreed to arrange for a little contribution towards the living expenses. When Joseph started kindergarten and 2 weeks had passed, the morning routine of him crying and refusing to put on his shoes became familiar, but Lynn seemed to struggle with it. "Come on, Joseph. The bus is gonna be here any minute." No. I want to play with Grandpa." "Grandpa's at work today. He's not home." "I don't wanna." "Joseph, your teachers and all your favorite books and toys are waiting for you at school." Lynn and I would coax him up by any means necessary. That's how Lynn and Joseph would set off every day. But something's been bothering me. It's that Lynn sometimes doesn't come home after she leaves in the morning. The walk to the bus stop is only about 5 minutes, not far at all. I've worried she might have gotten into some trouble, so I've tried calling her, but there have been several times when I couldn't reach her. On those days, she always returns with Joseph as if nothing happened, right around the time he's due back. "Hey, Lynn, where do you go during the day?" When I ask, she seems to dodge the question. "Oh, just running errands, buying groceries, clothes, that sort of thing." "Seems like you're gone for quite a while, though." "Just taking a little break." "Mom, give her a break, will you?" Harry would say, coming to her defense. Indeed, balancing housework and childcare, she does need some downtime. "All right. I'm sorry for sounding accusing. No one thought it suspicious for Lynn to take some time for herself during the day. In fact, we all understood it as something necessary. But my concerns about her weren't limited to just this. One evening, as I was relaxing in the living room, Lynn came to me with a request. Mom, I have a favor to ask. What is it? You seem so formal. I was wondering if we could increase the living expenses a bit. I was taken aback. Is the current amount not enough? Well, you see, since Joseph started kindergarten and I've made some mom friends, I've been invited out for lunch. She stumbled over her words as she explained. Can't you manage those outings with the money you already have? With prices going up and all, it's all going towards things like Joseph's diapers. I have felt the pinch of rising prices lately. I reluctantly agreed to give her a little more. But that wasn't the end of her financial requests. She kept finding reasons to ask for more money. What are you spending all this money on? Well, I've been shopping online. She admitted to using Harry's laptop for online shopping. She bought things impulsively to relieve stress. I suggested she find other ways to manage stress, and she seemed to listen at the time. However, a few days would pass, and she'd be asking for money again. It became a repetitive cycle, leaving me worn out from dealing with it. Lynn, you really need to think more about how you're using money. That's not true. Or, maybe you could get a part-time job too. We can't afford any more than this. When I said that, Lynn made a resigned, sad face and left the living room. After that day, her persistent requests for more living expenses stopped. Instead, I noticed something odd about Ken. He stopped reading his books and spent time in his room on the computer, working on something. When asked what he was doing, he wouldn't answer but mentioned, well, it's school-related stuff, and it would be problematic if someone saw it. Is that so? Hey, how about we go out somewhere this weekend, just the two of us? I've got something this weekend. Sorry, he said, and locked himself in his room. He never used to bring work home before he became a part-time lecturer. What's changed all of a sudden? Lately, he's also been somewhat distant towards Lynn, avoiding her even when they're both at home. Then again, I've caught them whispering in the hallway. There's definitely something odd going on. Feeling this, I discreetly went to a detective agency and requested an investigation into Ken. I hoped it was nothing, but under the same roof, we couldn't afford any mistakes. While hoping for nothing, the days passed, and fortunately, the results came back clean. There was nothing suspicious about them. Then, what's the cause of this discomfort I'm feeling? Is it all in my head? While feeling uneasy, I continued my routine between the supermarket where I work part-time and home. It was on one of those overcast days, seemingly reflecting my unsettled heart, that I received a call from the police on my smartphone. Hello, this is Mary Arthur. Yes, that's right, Ken is my husband, but... What? The officer on the phone spoke in a calm yet somewhat excited tone. He informed me that Ken had been in a traffic accident and was rushed to the hospital in an unconscious state. I was so shocked I could hardly comprehend what the officer was saying. The background noise on the other end of the line made me fear the worst about the accident. Yes, I understand. Yes, I'll be there right away. Excuse me. After hanging up, I rushed to inform my manager and explained the situation. I got permission to leave early and headed to the hospital. On the way, I was beside myself with worry. Being rushed to the hospital is serious. I felt a terrible sweat down my back, and my hands and feet wouldn't stop shaking. I could feel my heart pounding louder as I arrived at the hospital. A relatively young-looking doctor briefed me. He mentioned Ken had a bruised left shoulder, but his life was not in danger. However, since he had a severe head injury, there might be lasting effects. Ken would need to stay in the hospital for a while, so I was the one who completed the admission paperwork. Maybe it'd be faster if Lynn brought his change of clothes and toothbrush. Thinking this, I quickly called Lynn to ask her to bring the necessary items. After a few rings, Lynn answered the phone. Hello, Lynn? Ken has had an accident. What? I can't hear you well. It sounded like Lynn was outside. In the background, there were noises of people talking and cars passing by. And for some reason, she seemed to be speaking in a rushed manner. Ken's been in a traffic accident and he's been hospitalized. I raised my voice just enough not to disturb those around me. Oh my! Hospitalized? That's terrible. So, I need you to bring some necessary stuff for hospital stay, please. Understood. While her response felt somewhat robotic, I hung up, feeling a bit suspicious. Then, about 30 minutes later, Lynn and Joseph arrived. Lynn was carrying a duffel bag in one hand and holding Joseph's hand with the other, wearing sandals. I had finished all the paperwork by then and went out to meet them. Grandpa's sleeping, huh? Can you say get well soon to him? Joseph twirled his finger and lisped, get well soon. I hoped Ken could hear it as I watched them. Suddenly, Joseph said, Mom, I'm thirsty. Oh, but I didn't bring any drinks with us. Then, buy something. Just wait. However, unusually, Joseph started to fuss about being thirsty. All right. Please wait here with Grandma. I'm sorry, I'll just go to the store quickly. Lynn left in a hurry as if admitting defeat. Grandma, guess what? Joseph turned his pants pockets inside out, pulling something out. I've got a letter from Grandpa. He said to read it secretly. For me? I saw it was an envelope, unsealed. Curiously, I took out the folded note inside. It was written in Ken's handwriting, Lynn dangerous, evidence in wallet. Struggling to contain my turbulent emotions, I couldn't understand what it meant. But it was clear he was trying to communicate something. Could it mean there's evidence inside the wallet? Wallet? We normally don't look through or show each other our wallets. However, there might be a clue here. Desperate for answers, I instinctively grabbed Ken's wallet. Feeling rushed before Lynn could return, my hands almost slipped. I carefully but quickly opened his long wallet. Inside were some cash, receipts, credit cards. And among them, an SD card was tucked away. Could this be it? I pinched it between my thumb and forefinger, lifting it to eye level. Just then, I heard Lynn's footsteps returning. I quickly shoved the SD card into my jacket pocket and put Ken's wallet back. I could only find tea, but is this okay? I don't need it anymore. Oh, really? Oh, well, let's head back home then. Harry will be home soon. Trying to console a disappointed Lynn, we left the hospital room. That night, once the whole family was asleep, I booted up Ken's computer. I inserted the SD card to see what was on it. What could it be? Photos, videos, and some Word documents appeared on the screen. Photos? Videos? Ken wasn't the type to carry a camera or record videos regularly. It was unusual for him to have photos and videos saved like this. Without hesitation, I clicked on them. What appeared next were evidences of Lynn's affair. A strange noise escaped me, and I instinctively covered my mouth. Then I opened the Word documents. I initially thought these were diary entries by Ken, but they were something else. Upon closer inspection, they were summaries of Ken's investigation into the affair, written like a diary. What is this? I lost track of time reading through the diary. I realized this needed to be resolved quickly. Later, I called Harry to discuss something important about Lynn. What's up, Mom? Something about Lynn? He sat down at the living room table with a puzzled look. I showed him the evidence Ken had given me and told him everything. Harry was visibly shocked by the information and immediately called Lynn over. She had just finished putting the kids to bed and was dozing off herself. Lynn, don't you have something to tell Harry and me? Huh? I laid out the photos and the printed excerpts from Ken's diary on the table. This is the evidence. You've been having an affair, haven't you? The photos showed Lynn walking and chatting intimately with a man who was not Harry. What's this? Pretending not to know won't help. These photos were taken by a detective Ken hired. I spread them out one by one on the table.
And these photos were taken by Ken himself.
It was from a rare day when he said he had errands and didn't go out with me. That day, Ken had been following Lynn. I even know who the other man is. Ken figured it out.
No way!
The delivery guy who comes to our house often, right? The excessive online shopping was to meet him. What a surprise.
It's not like that, Harry, listen. It's not what you think.
Lynn's voice trembled. Under the living room light, her face turned pale as she desperately tried to deny the affair.
I was perfect at housework and childcare. How could I do such a thing?
But I didn't believe Lynn's words. With all this evidence laid out, she was still trying to hide the truth. Lynn, where were you when Ken had the accident?
I had gone out shopping.
Is that all? What are you implying? Honestly, I'm starting to think you had something to do with Ken's accident. She hesitated for a moment before replying.
On what basis would you say that?
I read Ken's diary. You were confronted by Ken about the affair, weren't you?
What?
At that time, you admitted to the affair. Not only that, but you promised to end it, keeping it a secret from the family. Lynn's eyes darted around. I pressed on. But your relationship with that man wasn't over. That's why Ken saw you at the cafe that day he followed you. No, that's... And there, Ken overheard you saying how much you resented him. You were planning some sort of revenge, weren't you? Ah, well. That's why Ken felt he was in danger and left behind photos, videos, and a diary. Harry nodded in understanding. So, Dad saved all that on an SD card and hid it in his wallet in case something happened to him? In his wallet? The letter Joseph gave me tipped me off. That short letter handed over in the hospital room. Without it, I might never have noticed these pieces of evidence. Ken knew you were wary of him, but he also knew you wouldn't suspect Joseph.
That child!
So, he entrusted the letter to Joseph, telling him to give it to me if anything happened. I continued to reveal Lynn's actions calmly. And on that day, Ken was framed by Lynn and got into an accident.
No, that's not.
When I called you, Lynn, you were still outside, sounding rushed and different than usual.
That's not.
Was it right after you had caused Ken's accident? She looked down, her shoulders shaking. And then whispered softly. I didn't think it would turn out like that.
What?
I just meant to scare him a bit. I pushed him from behind while he was waiting at a signal.
That's crazy.
I thought no cars usually pass by there, and it was the same that day. But then, by chance, a car came and Dad was.
What have you done? Dad could have been.
Harry lunged at Lynn.
I'm not to blame. It's Dad's fault for getting in my way.
Lynn raised her voice in defiance, insisting on her innocence.
How could you think such a defense is acceptable? It's obviously your fault. It's not me. I'm not the bad one here. So what? I had an affair. That's unacceptable, especially with Joseph around. I still want to be seen as a woman. I can't stand this anymore. I'm calling the police.
Harry took out his smartphone and started to dial 911.
I'll testify that Lynn was behind Dad's accident. Stop! Please, stop! I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Lynn began to cry and scream, apologizing for the first time. But neither Harry nor I could forgive her anymore. Harry explained everything to the police over the phone. The next day, we went to the police station with Lynn. The police were surprised by the rapid development of the case. Lynn, Harry, and I were all questioned. I submitted all the evidence Ken had gathered, but then an even more decisive piece of evidence emerged. It was footage from a convenience store's security camera near the accident site. It showed Lynn pushing Ken out, serving as irrefutable evidence. Lynn was arrested, and Harry served her with divorce papers. Though Lynn said she didn't want it, Harry dismissed her protests.
What about Joseph?
Joseph will stay with us. And we'll be seeking alimony from Lynn and her affair partner.
Please, have mercy.
Without looking back at her, Harry stated this matter-of-factly and returned home. Custody of Joseph was granted to Harry. As for the man Lynn had the affair with, he stopped delivering to our house. I thought maybe his route had changed, but that wasn't the case. According to the new delivery person, the previous guy had suddenly quit. Perhaps he left his job after cutting ties with Lynn. Serves him right. Several days after the accident, Ken woke up. I visited him on my day off. Though he had cuts and bruises, seeing me made him smile. My left shoulder still hurts. Any lasting effects? They tested me, and it seems there are none. I'll need some rehab, though.
I'm so relieved. It's a miracle. You're exaggerating.
After being discharged, Ken learned about Lynn from Harry and me and was deeply dismayed.
So, despite everything I said, I'm sorry for keeping silent.
He apologized to us. Since then, Ken became somewhat withdrawn. He praised and cherished Joseph for keeping the promise but seemed distant otherwise. He likely felt guilty for pushing Lynn too far. It's tragic because he did nothing wrong. However, his former students reached out. They would stop by after school to chat with Ken. It's clear he was deeply cherished, even though there were no upcoming exams. And it must have been a great comfort to him. Gradually, Ken regained his spirit and returned to teaching. While I continued my part-time job, Harry and I would take Joseph to kindergarten. With a school play coming up, we planned to attend as a family.
I endlessly wish for our family's health and happiness.